We need to get pure, high-quality DNA from the samples, otherwise none of the tests are going to work. It could be a half-sibling, or an aunt, uncle, or a grandparent, grandchild.
Scientists ran the DNA tests, and the results were impossible. The Cherokee people, long believed to be descendants of Siberian migrants, showed genetic fingerprints from ancient Egypt, North Africa, and the Middle East.
That is the response after the Cherokee Nation fired out a statement denouncing a U.S. senator's claim to be Native American ancestry through DNA testing.
This discovery shatters the official narrative. It suggests ancient transatlantic voyages long before Columbus. But the crazy part is how deep the cover-up goes. This isn't just a mistake in a textbook. It's a secret that powerful people wanted to keep hidden. Today, that secret is finally solved. America's genetic anomaly. For decades, the story of how the Americas were populated was considered solved. Basically, the story went like this. During the last ice age, around 15,000 to 20,000 years ago, small groups of people crossed a massive land bridge called Beringia, which connected Siberia to Alaska. These were the first Americans. This is the land bridge model, and it's what everyone was taught. Scientists back this up with DNA, specifically mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down only from the mother.
DNA testing is a huge industry, with millions of people around the world joining Ancestry websites.
They said all Native Americans belong to one of four main maternal groups, called haplogroups, A, B, C, and D. Later, they reluctantly added a fifth, X, but said it was super rare. Everyone's obsessed with this theory. It's clean, simple, and makes sense. But here's the catch. When researchers actually started testing the DNA of Cherokee descendants, the clean story fell apart. The results were not just surprising, they were impossible according to the official history. Instead of finding only the expected A, B, C, or D markers, they found something else. Cherokee DNA kept showing high frequencies of haplogroups T, U, J, H, and X. So here's the deal. Those markers don't come from Siberia. Not at all. These genetic markers are tied directly to the Mediterranean, to Egyptians, to the Berbers of North Africa, to Jewish populations of the Middle East, and to the Druze people of Lebanon and Israel. This wasn't just a small anomaly, it was a pattern. This discovery wasn't just an academic twist, it shook the very foundation of American history. If the Cherokee carry these markers and their oral traditions say they've been in America since the beginning, it means their ancestors had deep genetic links to some of the world's oldest civilizations. It means people crossed the Atlantic thousands of years before Columbus.
There are actually many other mariners before Columbus that discovered America as well. Decades earlier, even eons earlier, there were so many people that were coming across these islands and this continent.
And get this. The evidence didn't just come from anonymous lab results. It started raising questions about things that had been hidden in plain sight. Take one of the most famous figures in American culture, Elvis Presley. Few people know that Elvis claimed both Jewish and Cherokee heritage through his mother, Gladys Love Smith. His maternal line traces back to a woman named Nancy Burdine, remembered as a Jewish woman from Kentucky, whose mother was said to be a full-blood Cherokee named White Dove. When Elvis's DNA was tested, it did confirm haplogroup B, which is a native lineage, but his family history insisted on the Jewish roots. Elvis himself honored both. He wore a Jewish chai necklace and even had a Star of David placed on his mother's grave. His story shows how Cherokee lines could hold these unexpected ancient ties to both Native America and the Old World. And he wasn't alone. An Irish trader named Cornelius Doherty back in the late 1600s married the daughter of a Cherokee chief. Their descendants were tested. Their haplogroups, J and U lineages linked directly to Jewish and North African populations. Again and again, the Cherokee DNA Project uncovered markers that simply should not be there. Each new result just deepened the mystery. What most people don't realize is how politically charged this is.
People go through a long and drawn-out process sometimes. They'll submit paperwork to the Cherokee Nation because there is an application process. It's the Cherokee Nation who decides who their citizens are, not individuals.
Mainstream science has been incredibly slow to accept this. The land bridge theory is a cornerstone of American archaeology. To challenge it is to question everything. If Cherokee DNA truly holds Old World haplogroups, it forces a rewrite of how the Americas were populated. It also means we have to consider that contact between the Old World and the New was far more complex than anything taught in school. This is America's darkest secret. The findings are often met with total silence. Why? Because genetics is tied to identity. If these Mediterranean markers are acknowledged, it could spark huge debates over ancestry, heritage, and even land rights. For many, it's just safer to ignore the results than to face a truth that could unsettle everything. But the conclusion is hard to escape. The Cherokee may carry proof of a hidden chapter of human history, a connection between worlds made long before Columbus. The DNA proves an ancient link. But what else did these ancient people leave behind? The Mountain Kingdom. Long before DNA testing, historians were already arguing about where the Cherokee came from. There were two main theories. The first was that the Cherokee, who speak an Iroquoian language, moved south from the Great Lakes region way back in ancient times. This story came from ethnographer James Mooney, who wrote down oral traditions from Cherokee elders in the late 1800s. But the second theory argues the exact opposite. It says the Cherokee have been rooted in the southeastern mountains for thousands of years. And this is where it gets crazy. The archaeology supports the second theory. The evidence on the ground points to cultures that predate recorded history. During the Middle Woodland period between 200 and 600 CE, people believed to be ancestors of the Cherokee were living in what is now western North Carolina. And they weren't just living in small groups, they were building. They built massive earthwork mounds like the Biltmore Mound near the Swannanoa River, which was found in 1984. It's not that simple though, it gets more complex. Later, during what's called the Pisgah phase, from the year 1000 to 1500 CE, their settlements grew huge. Towns had a single massive platform mound in the center. These were political and ceremonial hubs, basically cities surrounded by smaller villages. Most archaeologists agree this was the timeline. So, here's the deal. The official story of simple hunter-gatherers crossing the ice bridge doesn't quite match this picture of a complex mound-building civilization that was thriving hundreds of years before Columbus. Now let's connect the dots. We have impossible DNA from the Mediterranean, a place known for building massive stone structures and complex societies. And in the exact same place, we have the Cherokee, who built massive earth structures and had complex societies. Could the mound-building culture itself be the footprint of that ancient transatlantic contact?
You can drive through these parts of Oklahoma where, I don't say Choctaws or Cherokees or whoever they may be are, and there are these whole parallel worlds that are existing right in front of you and you don't see them.
What if those ancient voyagers, whether they were Phoenicians, Egyptians, or lost Jewish tribes, didn't just arrive and disappear? What if they merged with the local people, sharing their knowledge of social structure, astronomy, and large-scale building? This would explain why the Cherokee society was so advanced, and it would explain why their DNA is so unique. This wasn't a primitive tribe, it was an ancient civilization. This advanced society had a powerful social order, but it was hiding something. The red and white orders. The mystery of the Cherokee isn't just in their DNA or their mounds, it's in their social structure. Back in the 1830s, a writer named John Howard Payne visited the Cherokee in Georgia. He sat down with the elders and recorded their traditions. And what they told him was fascinating. Cherokee society, they said, was split into two powerful groups. The first was the White Organization. This was a priestly order made up of elders from the 7 clans. They handled healing, purification, and prayer. They were the spiritual guides. The second group was the Red Organization, made up of younger men. They were in charge of warfare, which the Cherokee considered a polluting and dangerous job. But the real story lies with the priests. This priestly class was known as the Ani-Kutani. And get this, they were hereditary. You had to be born into it. What most people don't realize is they didn't last. According to the elders, the Ani-Kutani grew corrupt. They became too powerful, too controlling, and it led to a massive revolt that brought their downfall. The ethnographer James Mooney, who studied the Cherokee later, confirmed this. He traced the decline of the priestly power back to this revolt. After that, knowledge was no longer based on birth, it was based on skill. Now let's think about this. A hereditary priestly class that holds all the sacred knowledge. They grow corrupt and are violently overthrown. This brings up a chilling question. What was the secret knowledge the Ani-Kutani were hoarding? Could they have been the direct descendants of those first transatlantic voyagers? Were they using their secret lineage, their purer bloodline, to control the rest of the population? The revolt, then, wasn't just about politics. It might have been the Cherokee people taking back their own history from an elite class that was hiding the truth of their origins. The crazy part is what happened next. In the 1820s, a Cherokee man named Sequoyah did something no one else in history has ever done alone. He invented an entire written language for his people, the Cherokee syllabary. At first, only the medicine men, the Didanvwiski, used it. They used it to write down the sacred knowledge, the stories, the ceremonies, the wisdom. They knew outsiders were coming and they were desperate to preserve their identity. They were, in effect, writing down the real history, the secret, before it could be erased forever. They were right to be afraid. Outsiders were coming and they would try to erase everything. America's darkest act. The attempt to erase the Cherokee secret began almost as soon as Europeans arrived.
In the Americas, in North America, particularly in the Amazon, they think that there was millions of people living in the Amazon. But when the European explorers came over here, they gave them smallpox and wiped out everyone.
The first known contact was in May 1540 when Hernando de Soto's Spanish expedition marched through their lands. They called the region Guasili. They passed through villages in Georgia and Tennessee. They even recorded a nation called the Shalak. But let's be real, De Soto and his men weren't tourists. They were looking for gold and they didn't care who they stepped on to find it. When they wrote down Shalak, they had no idea what they were looking at. They saw people, buildings, and a complex society, but all they really saw was an obstacle or a resource to be exploited. But this contact brought devastation. New diseases brought by the Europeans and their animals swept through the Cherokee communities. Countless people perished, people who had zero natural immunity. Entire populations were decimated.
90% of them were wiped out.
Yeah.
That's a crazy number if you really stop and think about it.
Yeah. It's considered probably the most dramatic demographic disaster in human history.
Yeah, about that. This wasn't just a tragedy, it was convenient for anyone who wanted the official story to stick. You see, a disease doesn't just wipe out bodies, it wipes out knowledge. We're talking about a culture that passed down its entire history, its entire identity through spoken word. The first wave of plagues wiped out the elders, the very people who held the oral traditions and the true history of the Ani-Kutani and their origins. With the elders gone, who was left to tell the true story? Who was left to pass down the secret? It's like a library burning down. But this fire was selective. It left the land and the resources, but took the human hard drives that held the proof. It created a perfect blank slate for a new story to be written, one where the Europeans were the first civilized people to show up. A second Spanish expedition under Juan Pardo came in 1567, trying to build forts. The native peoples in response rose up and unalived nearly every soldier. The Cherokee were fiercely protecting their land. And maybe they were protecting their secret. This part gets left out of the history books. This wasn't a small skirmish. Pardo tried to build a whole chain of forts, and the Cherokee and their neighbors tore them all down. It was a total rejection. It showed this was an organized, powerful nation that was not going to just roll over. But the final darkest act was yet to come. By the 1830s, the pressure was on. A gold rush around Dahlonega, Georgia made white settlers greedy for Cherokee land. President Andrew Jackson, a man known for his brutal policies, claimed removal was the only way to protect the Cherokee from extinction. But here's the catch. The Cherokee weren't fading. They were thriving, and I mean thriving. This wasn't a group of savages living in the past. A man named Sequoyah had invented a complete writing system for the Cherokee language. They had a newspaper, the Cherokee Phoenix, printed in both English and Cherokee. They had a written constitution. They had adopted modern farming, built schools, and had an economy with a surplus. They were not disappearing. They were beating the settlers at their own game. And that right there was the real problem. In 1830, Chief John Ross took the fight to the U.S. Supreme Court, and he won. In the case Worcester versus Georgia, the court ruled that the Cherokee were a sovereign nation and entitled to federal protection. But Georgia ignored the ruling, and President Jackson famously did nothing to enforce it. Think about how crazy that is. The highest court in the land says, "You're right, this is your land." And the president basically says, "Yeah, you and what army?" This is where the darkest secret comes in. Everyone thinks the Trail of Tears was just about greed for land and gold. But what if it was more? Think about it. The Cherokee had won their case. They were a thriving, civilized nation, and they held a truth in their DNA and their traditions that challenged the entire basis of American expansion. If the Cherokee were not savages from Siberia, but the descendants of a civilization with ties to the Old World, they had a claim to the land that was equal to the Europeans. This is the theory that sends shivers down your spine. What if the Cherokee secret was that they weren't part of the group that supposedly crossed the Bering Strait land bridge? What if their ancestors came from somewhere else? What if the Ani-Kutani, that ancient priesthood, held knowledge from that time? If the Cherokee had evidence that connected them to an old world civilization, the entire Manifest Destiny narrative collapses. It's not pioneers taming a wilderness. It's one advanced nation invading another. What do you think? Is this DNA proof of a lost civilization, or is it all just a coincidence? Let us know below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.